Hello and welcome to the PsychLeadership podcast, the podcast where we discuss the intersection between psychology, leadership, and what it means to your small business. As always, my name's Luke Upchurch, and so happy that you took the time out of your day to join me. And actually, not just me today. I have special guest Ben Bohman with us. He is from, I believe it's pronounced StrataShield AI. Is that right, Ben?
That's correct. Yep.
Perfect.
I am.
Good
Thanks,
to have
Luke.
you, sir.
Yeah, it's great. I'm excited to be on. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation since we first connected. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So, folks, just a quick recap of last episode, and then we'll dive into some content. If you missed it, the last episode that I published was on managing stress and burnout. It was a holiday survival guide, so be sure to check that out. In that same vein of stress and burnout, a topic that has been on a lot of people's mind here lately is AI and how we manage that from a leadership perspective. So this episode, we're talking about leading with AI, embracing technology for growth and empowerment. So with that, Ben, why don't we get started with just a quick introduction on you? You've been in this field for a while. Tell us a little bit about StrataShield AI.
Yeah. So again, yeah, Ben Bohman. I'm based out of Las Vegas. I've been in the tech field, 25 plus years. I started, funny enough, I always think it's funny how I started because when I got into technology, I would have never thought this was something I would do. I never even owned a computer. So I just read a magazine, or not a magazine, but a newspaper article that said, hey, get your MCSE and you'll make money, the Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer. And I was like, hey, I want to make money. I had no clue I could do it, but ended up finding that I had a unique way of learning and technology really worked out. Fast forward, 25 years later, I've done everything from tech sales to engineering. And my most recent job, I was the director of advanced solutions for Comcast Business, who had purchased a company that I'd worked for out of Dallas, Texas. And that was a great experience. But as with all big corporations, you see a lot of rifts. I got a riff that I'd say worked in my favor. I was actually very grateful for it. It allowed me to start my business. And I was looking at the industry and I'm like, look, AI, there was two things, cybersecurity and AI, right? Luke, we've talked about cybersecurity as something you're very familiar with, and then AI. And I was like, man, I really want to get into understanding where AI goes, but not the shiny toys, not the let's see how we create an image or let's see how we create a video. I really wanted to see how it worked in business and how it would integrate into business. So that was the foundation of StrataShield AI. Now it is rebranding in January to Genova Solutions. Now I'm beginning to grow, add on partners, add on people, other people with me, and Genova Solutions just seems more. It seems more aligned in what our overall mission is, which is enhanced decision making utilizing AI. Not meaning AI is going to make the decision for you, but it's going to enhance the way we make the decisions.
Very nice. Well, and that actually bleeds perfectly into the first question I was going to ask you today. Right now, you hear, and maybe the movie industry has ruined this for us, right? We get, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, Skynet is coming, and
Right.
and they're so worried that AI is going to take their jobs. So
Yeah.
with your experience, I mean, what's the biggest misconception that clients have with regards to AI?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple. First, it is funny when you mention Skynet, because when I started these conversations back in February, January, February, March, it was almost like there was two perspectives of AI. It was either ChatGPT or the Terminator, right? That's how people visualized AI. It's one or the other. It's taken over the world, or else as simple as ChatGPT. But that has evolved. Now, what that has caused is this fear, and you nailed that perfectly, and worded that perfectly, is AI going to take my job? And I think in some cases, just like if you look at any technology, the automobile took jobs, but it created more jobs. You think about switch operators with telephony. The automation switch operating took all those switch operators' jobs, but the advancements of telephone technology created more jobs. And I think AI is going to be very similar with that. In fact, I think the best way to think of it is AI is probably not going to take your job, but the people who learn how to use AI to do their job better and to be more efficient at what they do, they're going to be the ones that take your job. And we've seen that even with computers, people who have rejected, like, I don't want to use a computer, you know, especially in accounting and things like that. We've seen people who don't embrace new technology, Blockbuster, right? People
Right.
who don't move with the trend, and they eventually get eliminated. But I do see that, and, you know, even from a psychology standpoint, that there is some fear and misconception with what AI is going to do. And this is why training and getting the support for AI implementation and getting ready for AI, which doesn't mean the technology, you know, it's people, processes, and then technology in that order. The technology is the last thing we worry about. If you don't get the people and the processes in place, then it's going to be a problem.
Oh, well said. Well said. Yeah, and I mean, I'm even seeing it in the in collegiate studies. So, um, folks, one of the ways that that Ben and I initially met, we're both alumni of Southern New Hampshire University with a psychology background. So we're both IT nerds in our day job, and then
Right.
moonlight in psychology. But something that I've started seeing, for example, you talk about it, impacting different industries and so on. I've seen folks that will use AI generated discussion board posts, for
Mm.
example. So
Yeah.
they instead of saying AI, can you proofread, can you enhance, can you
Yeah.
reword, can you give me a hand? They say AI, do this for me. And I don't know
Right.
about you, but I mean, when I read an email that's AI generated, I mean, we've all seen the Apple commercials and things like that, where the guy responds back. And in fact, if you've seen the commercial I'm talking about, a guy that he writes this email, and it's clearly in more of a slang terminology is what he's using, and AI
Hmm.
rewrites it, and it sounds over the top professional. And his
Right.
boss is reading it, and he kind of cocks his head to the side, like, is this from this? The email content does not match the sender, right?
Right.
Same kind of thing when we see
Yeah.
assignments uploaded that way. That
Yeah.
that if you lean too heavily into it, then depending on the model you're using, it ends up really looking fake. And so in the whether that's writing your employee year-end evaluations, for example,
Yeah.
you can tell when the person just leveraged AI, and that kind of reduces the efficacy. Just like
Yeah.
if I was using it, say, in a psychological evaluation or a report, right? If I just allow AI to do all the heavy lifting, I can't be surprised when it doesn't come out with the humanity side of it. How do you
Yeah.
address things like that?
Well, it's interesting, and this is across the board, I think, from whether it's education or else it's even business. And it's this conversation of the human in the loop, right? It's this conversation of AI being an accelerator for humanity. Again, even to our last conversation, not a replacement for humanity, right? And you're spot on. I think at first, I even fell into writing AI emails. And then the more I started reading AI, the more horrible those emails look, right? So at first I was like, wow, that's beautiful. This came from me. I was so proud, so excited. Then as I started writing more and using more AI and started actually reading what I wrote, I was like, that's not human-like. And I think that's across the board for whatever we do. But I will say 100% AI can be utilized to enhance your writing, not to replace your writing.
Yes.
It can be a great ideation tool. I definitely use AI a lot for ideation. I use AI even in school writing for organization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at those massive rubrics we'd have and being able to put that in there and say, hey, create me a great outline, even though some of the outlines are already given to you, but create me a great outline for how this should look. It gives me a good idea of how to outline a document. And then you write it, and then it can be like, hey, any ideas on this? Another thing that I've used AI for is paraphrasing, is like, hey, I'm having a hard time paraphrase this. Like, give me an idea. So I think there's a lot of ways that we can utilize AI, but still make it our own. The other thing is, and I'm a huge believer in training AI on your voice. I have 3 or 4 different AI writers, and I definitely train them about me on my voice, how I talk, so that when it does rewrite something that are my words, but I need it rewritten, it's not going to suddenly delve into something or use those stupid AI phrases. It knows how I write, how I talk, somewhat of how my humor is, even though AI is horrible at humor. But it's an enhancement on me. That's why if you're using AI, you're actually taking only AI and just say, hey, write this for me, first of all, you're probably going to get kicked out of school pretty quick, or you're
Right.
not going to, from an education standpoint, because they're going to see it, or you're not going to excel very well because from a job standpoint, it just doesn't look good. But if you write it with, and it's your words, your ideation, your mind, and you convert it using AI, you can actually make a lot of progress with that. But it does emphasize the need for that the need for humanity with AI.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's spot on, and it's like to go back to the school example, when I'm doing research, and in fact, I just this past weekend had I don't know 10, 15 page report that I had to write on intervention strategies. That's the course that I'm taking right now. But I specifically use there's an AI. It's within the Chat GPT ecosystem, but there's a specific AI called Scholar GPT, and it
Yeah.
specifically pulls scholarly resources. So instead of going in there and putting in some sort of keyword search or something like that, I told it very specifically the types of research that I was looking for in the and gave it parameters. I don't want anything that's older than this, and I need it to connect these two key points, which are fairly unique. So it's not an or statement, but an and statement, right? I need both of these,
Yeah.
and the results that it gave me back, I mean, they were stellar. Now, I still have to go out and read those articles. The
Yeah.
summary is enough to tell me should I dive deeper, but that's not a replacement, right? So
Right.
it doesn't do the work for me, but it definitely makes it a hell of a lot easier that I can go out there and say, give me that information. And then to your
Yeah.
point, to write something and have it enhance. One of my earlier podcasts was talking about things like resume building, and I share in there, use AI to help make sure that your resume has enough pop that that the AI that employers are using to pre-screen resumes. You want to make sure that it pulls into that, but not so much that it looks fake. And so, I mean, I just the other day polished up my resume, and I had everything pre-written, but to your point, I wanted AI to summarize some of that, because
Yeah.
and you're probably experiencing this some yourself, given the amount of time that you and I have been in the industry, given the amount of time that we've been in the workforce as a general statement, it's pretty tough to get your resume down to that 2.5 pages that most
Yeah.
folks will recommend. And so I point blank asked it, for this type of job, how far back do I need to go? And it gave me some suggestions on how I could tighten that up, how I could button
Yeah,
that up.
and another great thing with resumes is obviously people are using AI to scan through resumes and the keywords. And I think sometimes if you read through their job title and you do a comparison of keywords that are going to be needed in the resume and to your resume, you can actually do some pretty cool stuff with, hey, make sure you implement these keywords or give me some creative ways to implement these keywords throughout my resume. So then it is a little bit more compelling to someone reading it, right? And so you're using this compare and contrast, which is again another way that AI can help with, even if you look at psychology studies, right? Hey, give me a compare and contrast between these two studies, the different methodologies that were used, and then it looks at and breaks down the different types of ways the studies were performed and the different outcomes. So a compare and contrast, even with the resume standpoint, on keywords is another interesting use case for it.
So talk to me more about that. You're uploading in this case, a study or a resume, you're uploading the PDF for both of those, and then giving it instructions on how you want it to um, compare, contrast,
Yeah.
pull
So what
information
I
like that.
what I would do. So let's use a resume first. So you go to a job post, and you go to a job posting, and then you upload the job post. Okay. So you can just copy and paste. You don't need to do a PDF. Just copy and paste it into GPT. Then you grab your resume. You upload it and you say, hey, compare my resume to this job post. What's missing? What could be enhanced? How could I better align my resume for this job post, right? And do that kind of compare and contrast. And GPT is going to give you some very good ideas of how to better align your resume specifically to that job post. Because I think our past way of thinking is our resume was a broad resume that best captured in 1 page to 2 pages what we were. Now we're able to very quickly adapt our resume specifically to that job post using AI. It's just an interesting use case, but absolutely true. Same thing with a study. You can paste huge studies into GPT. Just do a control A on the page, paste it in a GPT, say, learn this. Okay, I've learned it. Take the second study, paste it in. Okay, now I want to compare what we just learned to this, and then give it some specifics about what you want to compare, what you want to look at, differentiators, things like that. It just can, again, it's this enhanced way of ideation, but you have to know enough to be able to give it the actions of what it's doing.
Okay. And so you can actually tell the AI to learn something, and how is that defined? How does the AI quote unquote learn the thing?
Yeah, so it's going to just go through, it's going to scan through all the documentation on it at a very rapid rate and then learn it within, as long as you're in that chat window, it'll have a pretty good, deep understanding of what it just learned and how it consumed it. And I'm not sure exactly where the storage methodology and how it's remembering it all. Obviously, it's taking mass amounts of storage, but it is remembering probably mass amounts of caching, but it is remembering it. And yeah, so AI is a great way. I mean, especially, I mean, in learning, and I've used it to paste 10 studies into it and then just kind of break down these different studies and how it's aligning with what I'm working on and how, and now this actually brings up an interesting point because I do this with business and it's this concept of talk to your data. We have our phones. We used to always call on the phone, right? Hey, let's have a conversation. Then we start texting, and now we do talk, but we're more texting. It's more texting. Now we have this way of talking to our data and this natural language processing, but this natural conversational tone with AI, the way we talk, the way you and I are talking, and that's this evolution where we're going. So now if I paste a study in there, instead of going through it, I start asking questions that I'm interested in the way I'd be talking to it. So when I talk to my AI, I talk to it like it's a human. I apologize. I tell it, good job. I say, you're off base. We get in arguments, but I'm having this human conversation with data that I'm interested in. And I know for me, I have some ADD, I've got some dyslexia, I've got some things where my natural learning is different and I learn through conversation. And so it's been huge for me to be able to learn by having conversations and asking questions on what I learned. But that goes across the board. Just throw into the chat what you want to know if it doesn't know it, and then start having a conversation.
Oh, that's really insightful. So So, in terms of the conversation, does the AI actually learn a little bit more about your nuances so that over time it gets your sense of humor. It gets that if I word it this way, Ben is going to understand. But if I get too technical, or you know what I mean, does it understand those nuances of conversation, or can it over time?
So it depends on the AI model that you're using. For the paid GPT, if you're using like for Omni, there is a memory component to it. In fact, if you've used the paid version of GPT, you can go and say, hey, what do you know about me? And I can go in and it'll tell me, hey, you like to write like this. You're very straightforward. You don't like a lot of nonsense. Like it'll tell me, even I've taught it about my history. You were born on a farm. You were raised with, you had two older brothers and two younger sisters. I've given it information that I wanted to know. Now with, let's say, Claude, which is a great writing utility, but with Claude, you do something called projects. And within that project, you teach it everything you want to know. You write, if you want to teach writing style, if you want to teach it multiple sources of information to rely on, you can teach it and then it pulls from that. So it does depend on what model you're using. The future of AI is hyper-personalization. I know a lot of people don't want that, but I always laugh because I'm like, if you don't want hyper-personalization with technology, then throw your cell phone away, because that's what a cell phone is doing. It's personalizing technology to us, right? It's tracking everything we do. What I want too is AI to know me well enough to be able to react and be a companion, a work companion, almost like an assistant to me, where I don't have to explain it so much. We're not there yet, but this hyper personalization, it's there more in some models, less in others, but directionally that's where we're headed.
Wow, that is amazing. I love the idea of being able to, and you hit on it before, talking to it like it's a human and having
Yeah.
those interactions. For me, something that has really helped me as a leader, pulling this back into the how do I leverage AI as a leader of people, and I say as a leader of people, there's a common misconception, and I've dealt with this some in my day job, that folks will say, well, I don't have any direct reports, therefore I'm not a leader. I've got news for you. Yes, you are. Right? It doesn't,
Sure.
folks are looking up to you, whether you realize it, whether you acknowledge it or not, is irrelevant. The fact is that it
Yep.
exists. And so using AI to have those conversations, to actually bounce ideas off of and brainstorm. I was telling somebody the other day, it's like talking to yourself, but better, because
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but prior to AI, I would sometimes pace back and forth in my office, and I'd sort of
Mm.
saying things out loud made them real, made me
Yeah.
made me think about them in a three-dimensional space, if that makes sense, so
Yeah.
that you almost visualize or conceptualize, how is my team going to respond, how might my
Yeah.
boss respond, or the board, or whoever your
Hmm.
audience is. But having an audience that is that knows you enough to provide feedback, but is also smart enough to pull in outside concepts,
Yeah.
to pull in information beyond the scope of your knowledge, that
Yep.
becomes powerful. And it's something I've only just started using. Um, but one of the spaces that I've used that in is actually when you're preparing a presentation.
Mm.
Um, I like to go in and actually tell the Chat GPT, because that's the only model that I've really ever messed with. Tell Chat GPT, I'm presenting to an audience with this kind of background. I always talk in these podcasts about the idea of knowing your audience. And
Yeah.
so I say, this is the background of the audience. I'm making this presentation, and how can I word this? How can I change the model of what I am sharing so that it resonates with them? And the ideas that are generated and the conversation that comes from
Hmm.
that is it's the equivalent of talking with your mentor. Is the
Yeah.
best comparison I can make. But your mentor isn't always available, and
Yep.
so this is, if I call my mentor at 3 a.m. when an idea pops into my head, I'm sure that they're not going to be so happy with me. But
Yeah. Right.
ChatGPT doesn't complain.
It doesn't. And you're doing something I think really important with that, which is you're challenging GPT or the AI to challenge you. And I'm going to explain this in the way that you've heard of bias in AI, right? So there's
Yeah.
bias in AI. Well, the typical way they explain that is when AI was created and you said, hey, create me a picture of a family, a suburban family, that's happy, and it would create a white family, right? It never created a multi-race or that kind of family. So there's this inherent bias in there. But now you take that and you go a little bit further than that obvious bias that was created in AI, and you start to realize this confirmation bias that is in AI. So AI naturally wants to confirm what you're thinking. It wants to be agreeable with what you're thinking. It wants to expand on. But what you're doing, which I think is important to AI, is you're challenging it to not be so agreeable. You're challenging it to think about what you're not thinking about, and not pat you on the back, but give you ideas outside of how you're thinking. And I think that's important, because if you just go in and say, hey, this is what I'm going to present, what do you think about it? It's going to be like, great job.
Right.
That's amazing, because it wants to give you that confirmation and that pat on the back. But if you challenge it to really say, hey, I need to know how to do better. I need to know where I'm wrong. I need to know how I can improve this. Now you're challenging it outside that natural confirmation bias, and you're going to get a lot further with it. So yeah, I like what you're doing with that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And great tips for our audience as well. I get folks a lot of times that they're trying to balance, as a leader, how can I get my team to utilize this but not overutilize it? And I think that's a perfect example of how you can, again, you're not asking it to create the presentation. You're asking it
Mm.
to give feedback. You're asking it, how can I do this a little bit better? So, so to that
Yeah.
end, are there any scenarios that AI is just not the best solution? And I think you posted this the other day on, I think I saw it on LinkedIn. Said something to the effect of, AI isn't your CEO; it's the tireless janitor.
Right, right. It's that idea that AI is good for leg work and not mind work, right? That's another thing I say, is that AI, it's not going to make the final decision for you. There are still what they call hallucinations in AI. There's that confirmation bias in AI. Sometimes it misunderstands how to read data the way we would read it at a human level. And so when you're going, just like you're not going to go in and say, hey, write this email for me, you're also, as a CEO, not going to go in and say, hey, make this decision for me. How should I run my business? It'd be catastrophic for the company if that happened. But what you can do is, again, provide intelligence, or use AI to provide intelligence for you so you can make a decision. Our normal way, and you know this being in management and with what you do, technology or in business, is to get a report, dig into that report, dig into that report, dig into that report, and get little pieces of nuggets so that we can make decisions. Now, again, with talking to your data, the report's only a conversation starter. If we go in, we implement AI into your business, now you're talking to that report. You're seeing a report and you're saying, well, hey, let's say, how much time has Sarah, worked on this? Who's my top performer? You're not digging in a report, you're actually having a conversation with your data. So, but that conversation is to get insights, not for final decisions, but it's to get insight. So now you as a human, you as a manager, you with all your years of training can make a quicker, better, again, faster, same as quicker, more efficient decision that comes at the human level, but using AI for assistance to get there. That to me really sums it up. So yeah, I would say AI, it's not the final decision maker with that. It's not going to be great at that kind of level of accuracy, but it's going to get you closer quicker so that you can use your knowledge for it.
I really like that. Is that, what did you say, having conversations with your data? Is that a company slogan, slogan rather? If not, it should be.
Yeah, it's for Genova. It is. So that's where this branding from StrataShield. So StrataShield started as this. It was going to be cybersecurity, and more like how AI is implemented in cybersecurity. And then as I started seeing I still have a cybersecurity practice, but I started seeing this need more for a consulting aspect, a solution aspect of it that didn't tie us into the corner of cybersecurity. And so Genova Solutions, that is basically our tagline, is talk to your data, have a conversation with your data. And I'm sure some bigger company is going to take that up and scoop that up before I can even get to the point of being able to copyright it. But right now, that's what I'm having, and it's the same thing of the way Elon Musk, if you look at what Tesla is doing with like having autonomous cars, that's the overall goal that we'll be attaining for Genova Solutions, but in business. I want to automate and create this robotic process in your business to allow the human to be more efficient. It doesn't mean the human's not in the car anymore. You still need the human in the car. There's no need for the car. Same thing with business. You still need humans in business, but let's automate all that legwork, all that mundane stuff that AI could just be automatically driving in the background so that you can be, as a company, hyper efficient. And I like to call it reimagining jobs. So let's not replace jobs. Let's reimagine where people need to be so that it's not about firing employees. It's about putting them into a more productive role.
Oh, that's really sharp. And I'm curious, how do you, within that space, within talking to your data is such a proprietary thing, right? Companies don't want to put that out in the ether. And so,
Exactly.
for instance, the company that I work for, my day job, I work with a major insurance company, and work in the cybersecurity space. So the name of the game is always, PHI, PII, and then we even get into the concept of what's called intra-company data sharing. So meaning a lot of your big insurance companies, they have different companies within their larger banner, right? So you've got the medical side, the pharmacy side, the home health side, things like that, right? A lot of insurances are getting into that multifaceted approach. And if I'm a member of, say, the medical side, the pharmacy side can use a lot of information about my data to make decisions. But legally, we can't share that information unless I'm a member of both camps. So if I'm using the medical and I'm in tandem a member of the pharmacy side, well, then I've already consented to both sides having my information and sharing with. Neither one of them is sharing anything that I haven't allowed, that I haven't given permission for. But if I'm not, then we have to de-identify that data and be able to share it from one entity to another. So how do you get around that? I've seen companies go out there and create their own watered down version of ChatGPT that lives on their servers, that keeps the data in house. But the problem is that the model is only as good as the basically how we've programmed it. So
Yeah.
it's not GPT 4.0. It's a watered down of the watered down version of it.
Yeah.
It's like free minus some steps. How do you get
Well,
around that?
it shouldn't be watered down GPT because they should be using an open AI model that is as expansive, which is GPT, right? Just with your internal data. I think the bigger issue is the models are as good as your data. So you hear that word crap in and crap out, right?
Yeah.
The politically correct word for that. But yeah, if you have bad data and like just this mass amounts of unlabeled, messy data, you're probably not going to get a very good AI response. And this is why you have to have this AI readiness portion. The other thing to say is that AI is not good at a holistic level. So you look at a company the size that you're working with and the amount of data, you can't put an AI model that's going to go in and read all the data and come back with something functionable. And even like you said, from a permission standpoint, it's a little bit of a nightmare. So what you're doing is you're saying, hey, this is where I need the most help with enhanced decision making. This is where I need the most help with this conversational piece of AI. And then you can still create permission structures within that to say, hey, at the table layer, right, when you get in the database, these guys have permission to this. If we query and it hits this, they're going to check the permission in the table and say, hey, this guy doesn't have the right permission, so it can't return. And it might return a partial answer to him, but it's not going to return the data set information in this, especially when you talk about PHI and you get into customer information or patient information. So you can do that, but you're doing this more in a very hyper-focused, that word hyper, so this hyper-focused way where you're saying, this is the data we want to look at. This is our biggest priority right now. And usually most technologies start from the employee layer up, where with AI, we're starting at the executive layer down. So we're really starting, because from a permissions standpoint, executives usually have more permissions, right, to get into the data. So we're starting at that executive layer and working down. But it's actually a very complex, I mean, the details really to get into how you do that. But let's just say you start with data governance, you start with your data cleanliness, and you clean up all your data. You create a model that gets that data and organizes that data, and now you can get your AI model, which should be just as powerful, if not more powerful. I mean, depending on which meta model I use, or GPT or Anthropic, or I use different models for everything. Whatever model I use, it's going to be as powerful as what they're using of what we're seeing. It's just focused on internal data from a security standpoint. I know that's a lot. It's hard to really get. I'm trying to. How do I not be too technical and stay out of the weeds with it? But yeah, it is possible. But you have to be focused, and again, you have to have good, clean data to do it.
Well, and I think that's helpful for our audience here, because we have a lot of companies that they depending on the leadership structure and the team, right? They tend to fall to those two extremes that you mentioned earlier, right? Is it Skynet, or is it going to help me? Is it going to take over? Is it going to help me? And the ones that the leaders that are really gung ho about AI, sometimes they want to get straight to that end game. So they try AI, but their data is garbage, right? If and that's some of these larger companies, especially if they've been around for a while. When these larger companies, when they tend to partner with or acquire other companies, it's common practice to maybe not massage the data, right? They buy the company, they inherit that company's user experience or whatever CRM they're using. They inherit their data. They don't always take the time to say, wait a minute, we need this data to be uniform, right? If you call it an SSN and I call it a social security number, is the system smart enough to know that those two things are the same? Well, maybe if I've tagged it that way, right? If I've given it the tools to make those decisions. If I haven't cleaned it up, then to your point before, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So some of these companies, some of these teams that I've seen try to deploy AI, they initially tried to deploy it with junk, and then they say, well, gosh, this doesn't work. It wasn't what it was cracked up to be. Well, no shit. You started out with really bad data. Are you that surprised that it didn't work, right? That
Yeah.
it didn't function the way that you expected it to.
Right.
So,
Well, another thing to think about is the type of data as well. I mean, expanding on that, you have structured and unstructured data, and it doesn't always align perfectly like this, but think of structured data as data in a database, and think of unstructured data as all these documents, this mountain of document, and especially in your industry, think of all the documents. And unstructured data is actually a great use of AI to be able to go through documents and find information, whether it's contract information or even in healthcare. We're running a couple POCs where let's say for spine and pain, where you have all this medical documentation on it, but a doctor can't even keep up with all that. But now you have a language model to go in and like ask about all the specificities to doing a surgery and all the new kind of ideas that have came out, and it's giving them a quicker way to obtain information. So yes, there's still every company, and this is another great exercise, is really think about the amount of data, the gold mine of data that companies are sitting on right now internally that they're not using for decision making, but it's just sitting there. It's massive. It's overwhelming. And you just take small amounts and you start working towards it to this, this just structuring and governance of all your data and then using AI. It's possible, but it's a long-term goal.
right, right. Yeah, that's something that I would like to see in the healthcare industry in general. And actually, you hit on this, the idea of clinical authorization. So if I need a surgery today, a lot of insurance companies, they get these medical records from the doctor, and somebody then has to go through and comb that and interpret that. And the education level of the person that wrote the notes, the doctor versus the person who is reviewing, are not on the same field, right? So now I have somebody that's reviewing my doctor's notes that, who's to say that they're interpreting them the correct way? Who's to say that they're understanding them the right way? And ultimately, they're making a decision to say, you need this or you don't need this, right? Like I'm
Right.
dealing with something right now that, I have a chronic issue, and a medication that I resisted with every fiber of my being that I'm on today is not going to be covered in the new plan year. And somebody at some corporate office must have decided that it costs too much money. They're not going to cover it. And so now, as a patient, I'm stuck with, well, you're not going to cover the one thing that helped. And it's kind of like, if we're playing poker, right? I have a good hand right now. I know how my cards are going to play. I can draw another one from the deck. Is it going to be a two? Is it going to be an ace? I don't know.
Well, this is, gosh, it's such a mixture there because the human element can definitely go in, like you said, from a knowledge base and say, look, I don't know enough, but I'm just going to deny it. Recently, I mean, in the news, there's been health insurance companies that have admitted to using AI and then programming AI to hit a profit margin by saying, hey, we need to decline 15% more claims to be able to hit our numbers for the board or for our investors. And now AI is going in and it's finding reasons to deny claims like yours. I mean, this is this might be beyond, this might be legislation or everything like that. So you have I go back and forth with that because with AI, you remove this human element. In some ways it's good. But then also you have it's the ebb and flow, right? It's a duality of man. It's what it is with technology. There's good and evil. There's a great way it could be used, but then when it comes to money and it comes to stuff like that, I don't know if I think they're just gonna program it to be more stringent and to come up with more excuses to not serve. But what you're talking about is I mean, obviously it's been in the news a lot recently, and it's a big problem that needs to be addressed. It's amazing what gets rejected that is common sense. My wife's a PA, she for Intermountain Healthcare, and she deals with that kind of frustration. So she has a panel of about 450. She's in geriatric, and she gets so frustrated with that, right? Like health company or insurance companies denying what she's saying. Obviously, the patient needs to get proper help. It's a problem.
Right. No, and that kind of leads us into the last point that I was going to make. before we shut the conversation down here. We're
Yeah.
almost at time. But it's building in the ethics within AI, and how do you
Yes.
slowly program that in, or at least be mindful of it. I mean, you hit on it perfectly before when you talked about building the perfect family, and the system maybe just putting white faces out there. There was a conversation I had actually with one of the architects on the team that I work with now. He was talking about a model that they they asked the AI to show pictures of dogs, or to identify pictures of the dogs, and it was identifying every dog as a wolf. And they found out that all of the pictures that they loaded into it initially with dogs all had snow, and so it was looking at the attributes of a dog, adding in the element of snow, and saying if these two things exist, if these attributes and this environment exist, then it must be a wolf. And so you'd show it a picture of a chihuahua and say, identify this. Oh, it's a wolf. And they
Yeah.
had to eventually go in and say the snow has nothing to do with it. That
Right.
that's not a factor. They had to retrain it. And so as leaders, as you're using AI, be aware. Ben talked about the idea that it's going to, it wants that confirmation. It wants to boost your ego a little bit. And so if you ask it, is this any good? Well, of course it's good. If you want
Right.
true feedback, you're going to have to not lead the witness. So that's no different if you think of, tying it back to psychology. If I ask my team, am I, did I do a good job? Well, I'm kind of putting them on the back foot. Of course they're going to tell me I did a good job.
Right.
Maybe they've got the psychological safety to push back, but especially if they're new, if I'm a new leader to them, it's a different kind of response. Now, if I word that as a, tell me how I could improve, or what should I start, stop, continue doing, right? If I word it that way, well, then my team is liable to give me better responses. And the same is true with AI. If we lead the witness, we can't be completely surprised that the witness just that they just want to please us.
100%. Yeah, we have to be mindful. I agree. That governance, that security, the ethics of how we use AI is going to be important. Like I said earlier, the duality of technology, the duality of man, it's the same thing. You look at social media, it does wonderful things for older people who can't connect with their family, who feel alone, or people who feel isolated, who can go in and make this connection. It does horrible things for teenage. You've probably read the studies throughout our, psychology. Like that's been a topic of focus of our studies. It's done horrible things for teenage girls and teenage boys. Just traumatically horrible things for it, but it's done great things in other ways. The cell phone, the same thing, texting, the same thing. Every technology, we gain some, but we're going to lose something as well as humanity. And AI, it's going to be the same way. We just have to try to be mindful and have more people who use it for good and have good ethics around it than people who are trying to use it for bad.
Well said. Well said. All right. Well, folks, that is all the time that we have for today. I appreciate you taking the time to hang out. Again, if you want to connect with me, you can always reach out on social media, and I will put some links in the description for Ben. I'm assuming that for your business that you might be interested in a plug there. So if that helps, I'm happy to do that as well. Again, Ben, thanks for hanging out. I really appreciate the time today.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy.